The Republic of Chile is a country situated along the western seaboard of South America. It is bordered to the north by Peru, to the northeast it is bordered by Bolivia, and to the east it borders the Andes and Argentina. To the south, the Drake Passage leads to the Antarctica. Chile's scenery is among the best in the world. In the north, it is the driest place on earth, the Atacama Desert. To the south, it is very cold and even claims 400,000 square miles of Antarctic territory. To the west, it is home of the famous Easter Island, and it is very known heads or the Moai monoliths. Chile now is one of the strongest economies of Latin America, and after a very rough history, it is now the less corrupt country in Latin America according to the United Nations. This video will give you some background information of the Republic of Chile, its Iberian roots, and how the United States intervened in Chile's history, and how this forged today's Chile. The capital of Chile is Santiago. Chile is 88.9% white and non-indigenous, 9.1% Mapuche, native to the land, and 0.7% Aymara, and 1.3% other. Chile's main religion is Roman Catholic, with 66.7% of the population, followed by 16.4% Protestant and Independent Christian. Chile holds one of the largest urban to rural demographics, with 89% urban and 10% rural. The Chilean economy is based on the exploitation of agricultural, fishing, forest, and mining resources. Chileans' Iberian roots, conquest, and colonies. The indigenous population in Chile was very diverse, but the two main people were the Incans to the north and mainly the Mapuche. Both of these people had long feuds to control what is now known as Chile. Chile was first discovered by Ferdinand Magellan in 1520, discovering the southern passage now named after him. The next Europeans to reach Chile were Diego de Almagro and his band of Spanish conquistadors, who came from Peru in 1535 seeking gold and silver. The conquest of Chile began in early 1540, was carried out by Pedro de Valdivia, who founded the city of Santiago, February 12, 1541. The Spanish did not find what they were looking for, gold and silver, but they did see the agricultural potential of the Central Valley of Chile. So Chile immediately became part of the Spanish Empire. The Mapuche were fierce fighters though, and they were able to kill Valdivia in one of the attempts to get rid of the invaders. The abolition of slavery by the Spanish crown in 1683 is set to be put in place mainly to resist the Mapuche from revolting against the Chilean colony. Chile was the most centralized and homogeneous colony that Spain and any other imperial country possessed, since it was surrounded by the dangerous Mapuche to the south, impossible, and the mountains to the east and the driest desert in the world to the north. Serving as sort of the frontier garrison, the colony found itself with the mission of fortifying themselves against the Mapuche and Spain's European enemies, especially the British and the Dutch. Chile hosted one of the largest standing armies in the Americas, making it one of the most militarized of the Spanish possessions, as well as a drain on the treasury of the Viceroyalty of Peru. The Chilean War of Independence began on 18 September 1810, created by the Government Assembly of the Kingdom of Chile, following the arrest of King Ferdinand VII by Napoleon Bonaparte. After extensive battles between the Chileans and Spanish royalists, it was not until José de San Martín, who, with the support of O'Higgins, marched across the Andes to overthrow the Spanish rule. And O'Higgins was elected as the first director of the Junta de Chile. The governmental Junta of Chile was in charge until 1826, when a constitutional reform was placed and Manuel Blanco Encalada was elected as interim president. The establishment of this new political structure united the different factions that brought Ovalle and later Joaquín Prieto to power. The new government was strengthened by a successful war against the Peruvian and Bolivian Confederation. The war was from 1936 to 1939, during which it broadened its support by reinstating army officers ousted when the conservatives had seized power in 1829. U.S. intervention in Chile. The first intervention of the United States in Chile was during the Chilean Civil War of 1891, when the congressional side of Chile, supported by the Chilean Navy, fought the President's army, which was then supported by the United States, which caused tensions between the new government and the United States. By previously being the most powerful navy in the Pacific, Chile had confidence, but after the Chilean Civil War, the United States had a more powerful naval force in that area. After an incident in Valparaiso where 2 U.S. sailors were stabbed to death by a mob, there was pressure by the United States, and they even canceled an arms shipment from the United States to Chile. This forced Chile to publicly apologize to the United States and to pay $75,000 in damages. The most in-depth intervention of the United States in Chile that I want to focus on was started in the 60s. The relations between the United States and Chile deteriorated when the leftist government party was elected into office. In 1970, Salvador Allende was elected president of Chile as a leader of Unidad Popular, who was selected by Congress as the president since he did not obtain the majority of the votes. Allende began doing what his predecessor had started, redistributing land, universal health care, and many other reforms that held the poor from Chile, as well as the country itself, in terms of inflation dropping and employment rates going up. Within 18 months in office, all of his latifundia was abolished. No farm was larger than 80 hectares. All the changes he imposed started to pay their toll. And because of Chile's flat currency, which means it had no real value, the wage increases and a lot of the economic reforms that his office had put in place started to negate. This is called macroeconomic populism, which ended up causing strikes by worker unions. Allende's close contacts with Cuba, his radical socialist policies, and his behavior started to grow more and more concern in the United States. Today, Chile is the largest copper producer in the world, behind the United States and Zambia, and ranks second only to Zambia as an international copper producer or exporter. Income from the international sale of the red metal accounts for nearly 51% of Chile's foreign exchange earnings. So that caused the major spark for the United States intervention after losses were claimed by all these private companies that were nationalized by Allende. So one of the declassified documents states Latin America is considered the United States' backyard, as justifying the behavior in the U.S. After the United States-based mining companies, whose assets were nationalized by the Allende government in 1971, came complete losses, and no compensation was given by Allende as was promised, the concern in Washington grew dramatically. This led to the Nixon administration to start imposing economic sanctions in Chile. Declassifying CIA documents now show that the administration also invested in propaganda from within Chile against Allende, using ads in majorly distributed newspapers, radio stations, and also donating funds to worker unions and popular groups that oppose Allende's policies. A project called Fuelbelt was established by the CIA. It is quoted to say, "It is firm and continuing policy that Allende be overthrown by a coup. It would be much preferable to have this transpire prior to October 24th, but efforts in this regard will continue vigorously beyond the date. We are to continue to generate maximum pressure towards this end, utilizing every appropriate resource." President Nixon also had said that the Allende regime in Chile was not acceptable by the United States. Based on false claims planted by the CIA against the Allende government, in which they made the military believe that Allende was going to take full control of it, the actions implanted by the CIA forced pressure to form a military coup, and on September 11, 1973, the coup took place, starting by taking control of Valparaíso, Chile's biggest port. The Air Force bombed the radio stations, and there was no communication between President Allende and the General of the Army and the Air Force. Little did he know they were the ones in charge of this coup against him. Pinochet ordered an armored infantry force under General Sergio Arellano to advance upon the La Moneda presidential palace. When the troops moved forward, they were forced to retreat after coming under fire from snipers perched on rooftops. General Arellano called for helicopter gunship support from the commander of the Chilean Army helicopter squadron, and the troops were able to advance into the palace again. The Air Force later arrived to provide close air support for the assault by bombing the palace. The defenders of the palace did not surrender until 2:30 p.m. The coup had started at 6 a.m. First reports said that the 65-year-old president had died fighting the troops, but later police sources reported that he had committed suicide. After this, the government junta of Chile was established, and it was the military junta established to rule Chile during the military dictatorship that followed the overthrow of President Salvador Allende in the 1973 Chilean coup backed by the United States. This junta acted as both the executive and legislative branch of government until December 17, 1974. After that date, it functioned strictly as a legislative body until they returned to democracy in 1990. Pinochet's regime helped the country become very stable, but this came with massive systematic forms of suppression and oppression of all political conflicts. An example of that is how he established fake combat exercises in which he called his enemies and killed them, but he had media portraying this as insurgents being killed by the army. They also had death squads called the Caron of Death, where they got rid of enemies by throwing them from the helicopters and reporting them missing. Pinochet was convicted of those crimes but never served time in prison, since he had died during home arrest in 2006. One positive thing of Pinochet was that he made Chile the first country in the world to make the momentous break with the past, away from socialism and extreme state capitalism toward a more market-oriented structures and policies. In 1988, a referendum passed for the dictatorship of Pinochet to end, and democracy was again established. Chile is now the less corrupt country in Latin America, as said by the United Nations.